At the beginning of the film, we are shown Hong Kong, wherein one of the disadvantaged neighborhoods is preparing for a mixed martial arts competition called Kumite. Workers even set up a huge cauldron of pilaf so that all participants had enough food. The competitions are held under a veil of secrecy, and only the best fighters from all over the world are invited there. Remember, it attracts participants from different countries, and in every part of the planet fighters are preparing for this event. We see different people associated with martial arts. It's an unlucky obstacle runner and a bartender. Breaks ice for cocktails, and of course, workers at the Bounty Factory in America. At training, a heavyweight boxer with collective farm equipment approaches his comrade and says that he heard that he was going to a secret competition. He warns that such tournaments can kill if you're a weakling. At this time in the Marine Corps gym, Captain Frank Dukes is practicing punching bag kicks when a fellow soldier approaches him and informs him that the colonel wants to talk to him before he goes on vacation. That Frank is going to Hong Kong, the colonel does not like the idea. Frank understands that the trip is threatened and decides to escape from the shower colleague, immediately reports the escape to the colonel. The colonel orders 2 of his best men to find Frank. After some time, Frank arrives at his son's home in California. The master's wife greets him warmly, but informs that her husband is seriously ill and she needs some time to warn him about the guest. Frank decides not to waste time and immerses himself in memories as in his youth. Under pressure from his friends, he broke into Mr. Tanak's house. The friends wanted to steal some kind of sword, but when they heard the sound of the door opening, they dropped their weapons and ran away, leaving Frank standing confused. He carefully returns the sword to its place, but then Tanaka and his son resort, and the boy kicks Frank through the plywood barrier. Tanaka explains that this sword of Khotan cannot be stolen, it must be earned. Frank admits that he didn't intend to steal the gun. Then Tanaka cuts off the visor of his cap in one move, and Frank doesn't even have time to realize that. What happened is what impresses Anaka. You didn't even blink, a real fighter, says Tanaka. He promises not to complain to the police if Frank accepts his terms. Tanaka meets with Frank's parents, explaining that the boy needs the discipline and strength that martial arts can give, and asks permission to train him. Frank asks why he is being used to train his son, to which Naka answers so he doesn't ask unnecessary questions. Tren notices, if you see me as just a punching bag, forget about our deal. One day, when Tanaka's son begins to be beaten at school, Frank intervenes and quickly deals with the abusers. Young Tanaka says that someday I will fight on Kumite and father will be proud of me. But unfortunately, the young man's dream never came true. After the death of his son, Tanaka refuses to continue training. Frank begs him, teach me, I won't let you down. But then Naka doubts, you are not Japanese, you are not of the Tanaka family. The man says that. Arriving in America, he had a family in Japan, a wife, a son, and a daughter. They died in Hiroshima during the war, moving to Shish, and he wanted to start over and pass on his knowledge to his son, continuing the 2,000-year tradition of the Tanaka clan. Frank promises that he will glorify his sensei by defeating Kumite. I'll make you proud of me, he says. Taraka starts coaching Frank, and we see him gradually learning. He gets confused between right and left sides, learns to fish with his bare hands, meditate, and even fight blind. Frank is training with Xavier. Not with his eyes, and over time is able to block the sudden attacks of the climax of his workouts. He breaks the machine while stretching impressively. Tanaka Tseng gives him the katana Frank earned through perseverance. At that, his memories end, and Frank returns to the room to his teacher, announcing that he is going to Hong Kong on Kumite. Frank promises that he will glorify his teacher. Tanaka tells him, my spirit will fight beside you, and believe me, this will come in handy for you in Hong Kong, arriving there to meet Frank with a Drovig who also arrived on Kumite. He tries to attract the girl's attention, but meeting her indifference, tries to shine. I'm too good for you, right? Meanwhile, at the hotel where the participants are staying, a journalist asks the guests about a secret tournament, but no one wants to reveal the details of the underground battles. You're here for Kumite, she asks. What is Kumite? Drop the guy. I know about your secret full-contact fights. Later, the big guy invites Frank to play an arcade fighting game with him, but Frank beats him easily. After that, the bearded man invites one person to visit. Tournament. Do you love fights? Do you want to see a real battle? Come na Kumite, I will participate. At that time, the military visits Tanaka's house to find out Frank's whereabouts. Sensei's wife reports that he recently came to visit his sick teacher, but can't say anything more. He didn't accidentally say that he was going to Hong Kong, interrogated by the military. I don't know. Of course, you know. Later in the hotel, the manager greets Frank and Jackson. Frank Dukes from the suite is joking. He's adding that there's going to be a lot of fighters from all over the world at Kumite this year. He warns them that for fighting outside the tournament, you can be eliminated from the competition. Then he leads them to the building where the fights will take place. The competition is not held in Hong Kong, but in mainland China. Once you get out of open spaces into narrow alleys, be careful. Frank presents his invitation, which states that he represents the Tanaka clan. One of the organizers notes that you don't look much like Tanaka. In response, Frank explains that it is his teacher, but the organizers do not believe that Mr. Tanaka could have trained him and ask. To render his skills, breaking brick offer him Frank without difficulty breaks the bottom brick. Surprising everyone when it turns out that Frank is going to participate in a secret Kumite tournament about which the whole of Hong Kong has already heard. The inspector is in no hurry to look for the military, because officially he did not violate any laws. Everyone knows that this year's Kumite will be held in Hong Kong, and it seems that these top-secret tournaments are more popular than the UFC. Meanwhile, in the hotel, Arab's Asian appearance persistently invites the journalist to the room, promising to give in. Hassan gets too cheeky when he tries to kill the mosquito sitting on her cheek. Frank interrupts him, saying that an American guy who loves brick tricks advises him not to start a fight because they will get kicked out. Since the tournament, Frank offers to resolve the conflict with an argument. If I win, I will take the girl to my room. He takes out a coin. I'll get her before you. Hassan can't believe his ears, but Frank stays calm, remembering fishing with his bare hands. Frank catches fish with his bare hands. It is possible not only to take a coin, but to replace it with another. You lost to the American bastard, he says. He takes the girl for himself, and she tells him that she wants to write an article about a secret Kumite tournament. She contacted an Arab who said that these fights rained exorbitant cruelty, something like cockfights, but with people. Frank invites a girl to dinner the next evening. While Frank trains in his room, Jackson jumps on the bed in dirty shoes and tries to rush his friend. Listen, stop doing nonsense suddenly sometime. You won't have children, he says. Frank calmly continues his exercises and goes out on the first day of the competition. The organizers announce that the tournament will be held once every 5 years, and this one will last 15 wow. There are 3 ways to win. 1, knock out the opponent. 2, make him scream "Matt, like I surrender." 3, knock the bastard out of the game. While spectators bet fighters of different styles and go to the podium, one of the participants gets hit in the face, spitting blood. Big guy immediately begins to gain pathos. That's what this sport is called. Bloody, he would still see our hardcore fighting. After this, a fighter in shorts wins, and on the podium comes 2-meter Jackson against lightweight. He clearly demonstrates to everyone what weight categories were invented for. Missing a few blows with his hands down, he gets furious and sends his opponent to the floor with one powerful blow, and then, like a real champion, challenges the winner of the tournament. Frank asks Jackson, "What did this Chinese do to you?" Zhongli replies that he is Mita's champion and has not suffered any. Previously, the manager adds that in past competitions, he killed his opponent with a blow bent, and then watched with pleasure as he died in the fight. John Lee comes out, and again against a small opponent in 14 seconds, he performs a choking move, and then finishes him with a blow to the back of the head, although he was already unconscious. The organizers announce that this is a new record. Kumite 14 Sikla 8 seconds. Frank Dukes and his opponent. That same Arab from the Arab hotel says, "Now it's my turn to show." Tricks and begins to slap his opponent on the cheeks, but Frank defeats him. The Arab, as promised, demonstrates his trick, but even his cunning maneuver does not help him win. Frank sets Mitya's new record, which turns Balloon's sinister gaze into an even more aggressive janitor standing nearby, rewarding himself with the fighter's knocked-out gold tooth. The fight continues, and we are shown beautiful techniques of different types of martial arts. There's even an outlandish style of kung fu monkeys that a bounty factory worker uses in the best tradie. Their pride fighters hold several fights at once per day on the same day of competition. For unknown reasons, the inspector changes his mind and goes to the Americans to inform them in which hotel Frank Dukes stayed. Men are immediately sent to the specified address. The captain returns to the unit, forbidding Frank to participate in Maita. He explains that the government with S&A doesn't want Frank maimed because they spent a lot of time and money preparing him, and now don't want to lose him. He insists, "Don't complicate our work, Frank. I'll be an AE." Well, in 2 p.m., we'll take you home 50,000 volts. Frank receives help from Jackson, and as in the best traditions of wrestling, knocking down 2 men, he buys time so that his comrade can escape. During a long chase through the streets, Frank manages to reset his pursuers. In the evening, he has dinner with a journalist, drinking wine. Despite the fact that he needs to recover before tomorrow's 3 fights in a row, the journalist asks him to take her to Kumite, but Frank replies that there are strict rules of secrecy there. Then the girl offers to spend the night together. In the morning, This is how he shows her his Belgian buns. In principle, it is extremely difficult to find a film wherever he does it. He says goodbye to the girl, agreeing to meet in the evening at Kumite. There he meets Jackson, who tries to repeat his trick with the bottom brick. "I know you want the bottom one," Jackson says, showing how he manages to break it without a scratch. He also finds his journalist, who sneaked into the tournament, sticking to one of the managers. A series of fights begins. The audience enjoys the spectacle, but the journalists feel uncomfortable in the arena on the train comes out. Li easily defeats his opponent. Then, in his sadistic fashion, he performs Fatalia by breaking his opponent's leg. The audience goes crazy for their champion. Frank also continues to move further up the standings with 5 straight wins. Finally, he meets a really charismatic fighter who shows Frank how to destroy him for 2 minutes. However, in 3 seconds, he himself flies off the platforms of the Kingdom of Morpheus. The monkey-style fighter gets into a serious grip of a heavyweight wrestler, and then with pleasure breaks his spine. It seems that the scientists have a competitor, but Dukes is up against him. The opponent helps Frank stretch a little before the fight, then tries to execute his move by breaking his spine, but uses the wrong grip. This is one of the biggest mistakes.
Never use it, because you might fall here.
And with headbutts and then beats the opponent with a light and casual movement of the hand, he drives his nuts back inside. Seeing how Frank dealt with such a strong opponent, Li became very tense. It was time for Jackson to fight with Li. Frank gives him advice before the fight. He has a weak spot, his stomach. Jackson doesn't understand what he's talking about, but Frank explains, "Aim for the belly and don't get under his right foot in combat." Jackson left in a few seconds. Champions, knockdown, but at the same time makes a fatal mistake. He begins to celebrate the victory before the opponent has time to recover. Li gets up and knocks out Jackson, then smashes his head with his foot, finishing him. He takes away the bandana of the defeated opponent to the malice of Frank. Constructively rejoices in his next victory, which he managed to cripple his opponent in the hospital. Frank promises Jackson that he will avenge him. Li hears this and says, "You think it's necessary," hospital bedmate Janice warns, "Don't interfere, Frank. I don't want to see him cripple you." To this, Frank answers, "And then don't look." Against the background of this, Frank swears with a journalist, who is against his further participation in the competition. Worrying about his health, she decides to contact the police with a request to stop Kumite. "Why is it so important to you?" "So that we stop Kumite just today, almost killed a person there. My friend will fight there and I don't want him to get hurt there," she replies. "Who is your friend?" asks Inspector Frank Dukes from the suite. The next day after morning gymnastics, Frank heads to the competition, but his way is blocked. Too military, enlisting the support of the inspector and his team, Frank scatters the police and takes the military stun guns. The inspector says, "No, we need him alive," and immediately a journalist appears telling them where to go. Frank tells the military to meet him at the airport tomorrow and goes to a tournament. At the competition, Frank knocks out a Thai boxer in the semi-finals, which impresses his colleagues, and journalist Li again goes out against a weak opponent and brutally beats him in a one-sided fight, after which he breaks his neck until he regains consciousness to honor the memory of the deceased athlete. Everyone in the audience stands up, and the organizers turn their backs on Kring, apparently as a sign that they are ready to turn a blind eye to such mayhem. Li approaches Dukes and speaks his second phrase in the entire film.
"Next, please."
While the audience is betting on the final, the fighters are preparing for the duel, and the second puts Li Melok Mashenka in his underwear to provoke the opponent to emotions. The big guy ties Bandana Jackson to his knee and says, "You were able to beat my record, but I'm gonna break you like I broke your friend." The fight begins from the first seconds. Frank delivers several strong kicks to the opponent's head, in which Li struggles to show that he does not feel these blows, but Frank over nonetheless. In battle and sends the old man to a knockdown while he is showing off, one of the managers gives him practical advice: knock him out. However, Frank resolutely refuses to do so. At this time, Zhong Li takes out a crayon from his underwear and rubs it into flour, blinding Frank with the powder. Then he begins to beat him while mocking him at the same time. Frank takes his emotions under control and remembers how he once tempted him to fight blindfolded. He then blocks Zhong Li's strike and eventually blindly beats the opponent, forcing him to surrender by uttering the name Paraguayan. This film inspired the creators of the legendary Mortal Kombat series of games. At the end of the credits, it is stated that the film is based on true events. However, these events were only described by Frank Dukes himself in his memoirs. It is documented that the prototype for Johnny Cage was just the character Frank Dukes.